we saw before. It's the 14 inches by 21 inches. And I'm going to put in some column guides, which I can do by going under Layout to Margins and Columns and selecting 5 columns because that's the format that we're using. I'm going to go ahead and set my ruler down at the edge of the place where the text can print. And I am going to make a space for my flag by taking the line tool here like we saw in the last video. Remember that over here on the side I can see this dashed line going up and down as I move the crossbar around. I know that I want it to be 3 inches, which is 18 picas. I'm going to have it so it's 18 picas and just stretch that line right across. If I hold shift, it makes the line stay straight. That makes a physical line on the page that will then print. Now I need to start making boxes. I'm going to start by making a box for my flag. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Apple Z will quickly undo. Need to switch to my text tool. Remember, this selection tool lets you move boxes around and reshape the boxes. This lets you deal with the content in the boxes when it's text. This lets you deal with the content in the boxes when it's an image. Here we go. Take my text tool, and I'm going to type this in. Remember, you can name your thing anything that you like as long as it has your actual last name in it. I just do a Command A for select all. Make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. Make it 120 points. And let's change it to a different typeface just because I can. There you go, mine's super fancy. I have now made a box and I've typed in it, right? That's one way to get the text in it. I'm going to center that over here. It's the same types of buttons that you have in Word. Okay, now let's make a box and make a headline. Make a new text box. Remember, if I click this, this lets me move the box around on the page, resize, reshape the box. Stuff I don't actually want to do, but that would let me do that. To create new text, I need to do this. I'm going to make a 4-column headline for a 4-column story. And since it's the major story on the page, I'm going to make it 60 points. Again, Apple A, select all, go ahead and make that 60 points. And for the typeface I want, I can just pick that from the menu as well. So this main one, I'm going to make it a Helvetica. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill up the rest of the space with an X so I can see a little bit better how my design looks. You should do this as well. Any lines, you don't have to worry about them fitting, just fill the extra space with an X. The only thing that the headline absolutely has to have is you writing what point size the headline is. So again, I've made a text box, I have typed in text, and I have formatted that text. Now let's bring in one of the stories. I'm going to go ahead and make a place for the story to go, like this. And to actually place it in, I'm going to go under File, to Place, or I can just select Command D from the menu. I'm going to pull that mushroom story in on the top. Now secretly I would not really use the mushroom story as the lead story on my page in my dominant module because it's really not super newsworthy, but we're going to pretend that it is, and maybe I might just because it has art or whatever. I'm going to blow up my view so I can see what this story looks like. Remember, I can do that by Command plus and Command minus to increase and decrease the view. And you can see that this has a couple of problems with it. Number one, it's not the correct typeface. Number two, it's not in columns. And number three, it does not have the first lines indented. So let's see how to do that. I can go under Edit to select all, to choose all the text inside that box to work with. Let's fix the typeface first. We know from the specifications for the project that we want it to be 10-point Times Roman. So I'm going to take Times New Roman, and I'll just change this to 10 points. I'm going to hit return, and it does that automatically, so that's nice. Now we'll put it in columns. We're going to go to Object, Text Frame Options, and that will let me pick the number of columns. And I'm going to, this is going across 4 columns, so I'm going to pick the number 4. Actually, it's going across 3, I think. I'll say OK. Automatically sets it into columns. That's great. You'll notice that the edges of this are not aligned with the edges of the columns. There's a lot of white space and it varies in here. I'm going to want to neaten that up. I can do that up here with these buttons by picking the hanging justify. The hanging justify is the one that shows the 2 sides squared off and then the last line does not go all the way to the end. If I pick the full justify, I could start getting some funny looking stuff here, right? Where I'll get like big rivers of white going on. That doesn't look so well, so I definitely want to pick the hanging justify. It will have that a little bit, but it does look better. All right, I'm to zoom out for a second, and you can see that my story doesn't actually fit here. So I'm going to need to make a modification on that. Probably the easiest thing to do for that is going to be to make my text box smaller. This is beginning editing, so I do not expect you to make all the stories fit exactly. So as long as there is any of the story that continues on, you're fine with that. This little red box here tells me that there's more of the story, and I would just use that to link to a story inside on what we call a jump page. Alright, so I've made my text. I have formatted the font size. I have put it in columns. And the last thing that I need to do is handle the indents that are right here. And so I can do that by choosing my paragraph menu, and I look for the thing that looks like an indent. It's the second one down here. This again is measuring in points and picas, and a good sort of rule of thumb is to do everything in picas. So I'm just going to do that as 1 pica, and when I return that, you can see it automatically indents the lines. So there we go. I have now made a text box and typed in it and formatted it. I've done that twice. I've made a text box and imported text with the place command, file place, and formatted that by justifying the columns, by indenting the first lines, and by changing the typeface. One last thing to know, remember everything goes in a box. You can actually, if you want, type in your bylines and format them within the box itself. Another way to do that is just to create another small box on the top. I could do that by, so for example, doing this. An advantage of doing that is it makes the measurements later easier. And I'll type this in by Sturgill. A chance to get my byline on the page. There's specifications for formatting this that will be contained on the specifications for the headline thing, but I can just take this, move it up here, and put it on top. You can see right now that the two text boxes are existing together. I can fix that by selecting text wrap and then making the text wrap so that it wraps around the box. There, now my byline is in its own box. It's actually pushing the other text out of the way so it doesn't overlap anymore, as you can see. Now again, I could just follow that same procedure to format the things in the box. I'm not going to show you how to do that because that should be pretty clear. All right, let's go back out, and we're going to place in our picture.